Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Eric, you're up. Bring us some good news.
Yeah, do my best. So thank you for the time this morning. I've got several budget-related topics to bring forward for the board for consideration, possible future action on some of them. Some are just FYIs. The first is the permitting software that we have, and that's more of an FYI just to let you know where we're at with that. It's currently 26 years old. It's a access database that was custom created by ProWest. They don't have staff anymore to maintain, keep that up. Thankfully, it still hasn't broken. We had been in the process of going with another online vendor, but that process is stalled out. It's 3.5 years and we aren't live yet, and it's not looking promising. So Jeff and I have been vetting other solutions. We believe we found one that really is going to work well, and it would also have the ability to be used by other departments. So we're working on getting some estimates updated from them for that, for inclusion in the 27 budget proposal, just to make the board aware of that. The second item is with our 911 addressing program, and this is to put forward an idea for the board's consideration relative to the fees that we collect for that. So we currently receive address application fees for new addresses that are $110. We collect $275 for new road signs, and then we collect just materials cost on replacement blue blades and posts if when needed or requested by a landowner. These fees aren't covering fully our costs of administering the program, so we receive from the highway department their numbers for 2025's program admin, and that came in at just under $38,500 with how they bill it out. And what we collected last year was $10,000 roughly, and we've averaged $15,000 and change over the last 4-year period. So one of the aspects that we have with this is it's labor intensive as far as processing payments. The payments come into our department. We basically just pass them through to the highway department, who then codes them and receipts them. So our office isn't receiving anything for offsetting the costs of our 2 staff that deal with 911 addressing. There's also an issue with fee collection. We have a half dozen or so parties a year that need a new address for whatever reason and tend to refuse to pay, and there isn't a good mechanism in the statute for being able to collect those fees. So it's always been kind of an outstanding issue of what do we do? Do we just write those off, or do we look at an alternative? And the alternative that I wanted to put forward for the board's consideration was, instead of collecting fees and having the issues with collections and being able to eliminate staff time and processing fees, since we're already not covering our full costs, what if we just allocate an amount in the budget in whatever account or accounts would be appropriate to cover the costs of the program admin, and that just resolves the issue we have with collection and saves on staff time with processing payments that aren't fully covering our costs.
Eric, do you allow people to install their own 911 signs?
The initial install is done by the highway department staff because they have to do a go for one locate. And so that's part of the expense is, I gave some examples from the highway department of doing a single address install in the northern part of the county is $576. On the south end, it's $218. Well, that's because they have to first go out there, find the driveway, mark it for go for one, do a ticket with go for one to have them come out there and mark it, and then they have to wait. Once go for one's done their marking of infrastructure, then they can go out and use their pneumatic post driver to set the blade. In the case of an existing blade or post that's damaged, vehicle runs through it or something like that, then the landowner's responsible for setting that replacement post if they need to and making sure they comply with go for one.
Eric, I guess I've never observed, are they breakaway posts? They're just regular posts, so the landowner isn't obligated to put in a,
The 911
Well-
posts are not breakaway, the mailbox posts.
yeah, and all
Yeah.
the stop signs, et cetera, are, yeah.
It's just a standard steel post. I mean, it's not sturdy enough to cause it's meant to
Fall.
break, when a vehicle hits it, so it's not.
Yield or twist, so it doesn't damage.
Yeah, the way the ordinance is structured is once the sign is installed, it's then the landowner's property, so it's on them to make sure that they replace it if the reflectivity becomes an issue. That's another side bar of most of our address blades were installed in the 90s when we first did 911 addressing, and as you drive around the county, many of them are not meeting reflectivity standards anymore. So that's a complication with how the ordinance states that those are personal property, that there isn't a way for us to say, hey, you need to replace your blade to get it up to reflectivity standards.
I'm still going back to, as a resident, I could install that 911 sign, I feel. I mean, a mailbox, I've installed several of those on my own. You go for one call, they come out, even say putting up fences or something like that in the right-of-ways, or just out of the right-of-ways. For some people, yeah, they couldn't do it, but for I think a lot of people, it wouldn't be that big of an issue. Like I said, I'm just trying to think of where we could save some dollars if we had that option. Just like septic systems. I know that a homeowner can install their own. They have to have it, of course, as you know, I'm not telling you anything new, have to have it drawn up by a professional and all that kind of stuff, go through all those, but the homeowner actually could install their own septic and have it inspected and stuff like that. So I can't see something as simple as driving a post and hanging a sign costing $576 for northern Hubbard County. I mean, if I wasn't gonna be reelected, I would go into business myself installing 911 signs for the county, because that just seems excessive to me.
Yeah, part of it is they have to be placed in a specific location relative to the driveway for consistency, and my concern would be if we allowed landowners to do that, we'd get them not being consistently placed. Another issue or benefit to having the highway department set them is we do run into enough cases where someone says, oh, I'm gonna put my driveway here, and we get out there and the approach is somewhere else, and it's far enough away that it requires a different address number. And so if we had people doing it themselves, I could see them not understanding the importance of where the driveway is relative to the number, and then we could get things that would be out of sequence.
I know the last one that was installed for me, I had to have the driveway in before they would come out and do it.
Yep, that's to make sure that they don't set it and then something happens and the landowner puts the driveway elsewhere, and then we've got this blade.
That happens more often than anybody would think. They change their mind, oh, I want a better access over here, you know, because my house is over here, now I want a straight driveway, not a curvy driveway. And then there's also, that's one of the requirements for some other counties, is you have to have the approach in place before they'll put a 911 sign up. Not just staked, because it can still be moved. Usually once there's a culvert delivered, it's pretty sure where it's going, but yeah, how often does an order for the address numbers happen? Is it once a month, once every, just when they come in? Or do you do it in bulk batches to try to reduce the amount of shipping, and then when they get installed, it would be groups rather than just one?
Yeah, Andrew, it'd be the best to say exactly where they're at with that, but I know in the last year they started testing with a new vendor for the blades that would have them permanently on there instead of previously we just placed stickers.
Yeah,
And then they're more durable, and they were, I believe, batching them and getting like a 2-week turnaround, so they'd get whatever addresses came in that period, order them, and then once they received that batch of blades, then they'd go install. So that, I believe, was working out fairly well and had reduced the cost per blade.
yeah, to have the blades made by the manufacturer instead of sticking numbers on them is a lot better. They're silk screened onto it. It's a pretty good process. They last a lot longer. They stay reflective a lot longer. They're all consistent. You don't have a number crooked and so forth on them. So, yeah.
Ted, I can appreciate what you're saying because you're very handy and you're practical. I'll give 2 examples. One is at our Prime West meeting last Thursday, Prime West is trying to figure out how to better facilitate people getting to appointments. And so they're looking at implementing a car care program. And one of the examples they gave is some people don't have transportation because their cars don't work, because they didn't realize they had to check the oil and the engine actually blew up, because they didn't know that oil was a function of the car. And the second example I'll give is we've all been on township boards and people move out of the city and they just expect their road to be plowed. And they haven't a clue of why the township can't just take over a road. So I really appreciate what you're trying to say, but overall, I agree with Eric that wouldn't work well.
Yeah.
And then you'd have to, even if you allowed it, then you'd have to go out and check it, inspect it, make sure it was put in the right spot and done properly.
Well, there's even the thought if it was allowed, it would be the highway department then could go out and mark where it should go,
Yep.
and then not have to install the post or the sign or any of those things. And like I say,
If you're saving any, if you have to go out and mark it and you have to come back and inspect it, it's, probably doesn't take you a heck of a lot more time just to install it. And it, you know, it looks like based on the average annual fee revenue divided by the $110, that's about 137 of them a year. How many roughly, what percentage do you think are not paying?
Oh, it's under a handful a year. We do have one that is a larger situation where it's a builder that's got several properties where new structures have been built, and they've been unwilling to come in and get addresses and pay the fees for what they need to get those properties properly addressed.
Statutorily, we can't add that to their property tax, can we?
No, I've looked into that many times over the years with our attorneys, and they've said for whatever reason that wasn't a part of the statutory authority, so they advised against.
I guess you could probably add it on to specials if you were a city and wanted to get paid that way, but.
You know, in any normal year, I might be obliged to go with this, but the problem is you're gonna take what probably is 85–90% of the people are paying the fee. And it is for the benefit of the property owner
Yes.
and the benefit of the county, and we're absorbing well over half of it to start with. And shifting it to the levy in a budget year where we really cannot be increasing budgets. And it actually turns out to be almost twice as much because you're taking revenue away at the same time. So that would be my reason to keep it as it is and maybe raise the cost a bit to cover a little more of it. And then look at it again later, because I get it. I mean, I know what you're saying, just bad timing. I know where everybody else thinks.
Well, I agree with you, because we're looking at areas we have to cut.
And I mean, every $20,000-$30,000 is gonna matter.
It is. I like your concept.
Yeah,
I
It's
just
not
don't
now.
like adding something else to the levy this year.
yeah.
The only other thing would be is if, I guess it'd be you and the highway department figuring out where that might be already in your budget.
Yeah, it isn't.
Can it be part of our sign ordinance in some form or another?
No, that's really a different matter altogether. So that's one of the other topics I'll get to this morning is about our 911 ordinance and some work that we would like to do to it to make it updated so it can address all the things that we're having to deal with now with addressing that didn't exist when the program first started.
So Eric, I'm just curious with this developer that you're talking about. Can he not put signs up, sell the property, and then the property owner would be liable for the sign? Or is that something that has to be done before the property goes on the market?
And really wouldn't come up with a property sale, so it's, you know, in that instance, it's a matter of, do we try to get that owner to pay the fees, or do we say the importance of public health, safety, and welfare outweighs that, and we just address them and absorb the cost? The problem with doing that is if the word gets out, then more people potentially might say, well, I'm not gonna pay the fee because I know the county's gonna put the blade out anyway.
So if no one's living on the property,
You know, these are occupied
or they're
structures.
occupied,
Yep.
You know, we require people to build their approaches to certain specs as they attach to county roads or whatever. Why can't this be a requirement of any permit that's required for the property, that you're not gonna get the other permit if you don't take care of this?
Well, the problem is most of these are in non-shoreland areas, so we don't have any other permits required other than septic systems.
Without countywide zoning, you're not gonna catch all of those. You know, that's just kind of the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, gas, they have countywide zoning, so every structure needs a permit. And that's where the money gets generated. They're putting up a structure, well, they have to get a permit for the structure. That's built into the cost for some of the 911 addressing as well.
I mean, I guess I don't understand why it's different than any other fee that the county charges. If I come in to record a document, I have to pay the fee or it doesn't get recorded.
but if I build out of an area that's not zoned, what would I have to record with the county?
Well, I guess you don't get a 911 sign then. I mean, which is not a smart thing to do.
But
Yeah, I get that.
legally, I don't know what the emergency services says. You know, there's that plays into it. It would kind of be nice to have a discussion between the emergency services, yourself and Andrea here as well, to talk about how can we coordinate to try to reduce some of the costs. I know she's trying to figure out through some restructuring at the highway department how to better utilize personnel and whatnot. So I think that would be a good conversation to have. Maybe we can find a way to cut some costs there and maybe shift the workload a little bit. I know when I was with Cass, we basically, once a month, a new address number order came across the desk that was organized by GIS. And then put it into a spreadsheet. The highway department ordered all of the signs. And then when they showed up, the highway department installed them all. And I know they raised their fees as well to try to cover some of the costs. So,
Is it standard practice in other counties that your department handles this portion? Or do highway departments handle?
It varies.
depends on staffing levels and their expertise, really, because if you're gonna look at a GIS placement for a driveway and then therefore the address number next to it, I mean, nobody at the highway department has that ability to do that.
Yeah, you would
And then
think,
the addressing has to happen in a grid pattern, so, I
Yeah,
mean,
it
even,
does.
it is really, a small distance change in a driveway can affect your address number, it's gonna change it dramatically.
and you would think, I don't know how they get an address if they don't pay up ahead of time. And-
Well, though these properties haven't been addressed, and that's the issue of, do we address them so that public safety is addressed, emergency services can find somebody when they place a 911 call there, or,
I'm wondering how do they get their mail? They don't have an address.
P.O. box, they go to town.
There's that. Or if it was a summer residence, they don't get mail at all.
I know a lot of times, like, even to get utilities like power and everything, they want the 911 sign in place so that they know I'm at the right location.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna give you power until I have verification that that's the address number that you're at.
That's my thought is, I guess, I don't see how they get an address if they haven't paid up. You know, and then like you say, how these other services all happen if you haven't got an address, so.
yeah, again, they're outside of shoreline, they're multi-tenant properties, so there might be a address, but there aren't, all of the dwellings aren't addressed as they ought to be.
And I guess if the house was on fire, they could call 911 and.
Do you know, is there a certain requirement that, say a developer plats a certain section, maybe there's 7 lots on this road, in that subdivision, what is the trigger for putting up a street sign?
So you,
A certain number of addresses on a given road?
it's generally 3 or more, because otherwise, once you get past 2, even 2 can be problematic of
Yeah.
both blades are at the road, and then the driveway, you go in and then it Ys, and then you're wondering, well, which one's which? Some people do put up a secondary blade at the fork to help emergency services, but that's probably the exception rather than the rule.
So
From my
then
experience,
tell
yes.
me, how is a street developed on an area that's not zoned?
Well, if we get to the point of there's a third or more addresses on could be a private road, then that would be the trigger point to say, okay, this needs a 911 road name, and then the addresses need to be assigned off of that new road name.
And then, so then your office covers all those costs?
Well, those can be fun too, because you get somebody that builds new on a road and that triggers a road name, and then we have the fun of how to collect. And you've got the other parties that aren't happy about their addresses changing, so they aren't gonna be very cooperative in paying the fee to get the road name or get the road sign placed.
There's a lot of background work that goes into it when a scenario like that happens. I've seen letters sent out to all the property owners like, hey, you're gonna have to change it. Like it or not, that change has to happen. Because there's X amount of houses on that road now, where maybe it was a private road to begin with no name. Now it has a name, and there's 7 addresses on this road, so everybody has to change their address according to the reallocation from the 911 mapping.
But we don't have any teeth if they don't pay.
Right.
I mean, it could be part of, I mean, for plats, it could be part of the process when you apply for a plat, that it's part of the fee that you have to.
Right, just like
You have to pay
develop
the
the
fee for
road.
all the lots on the thing, and then that goes into a fund that sits there for placing 911 signs when you actually have somebody living there. They can pass that on to the purchaser of the lot, that cost them, when they sell the lot.
You know, with
But
plating.
that only works in the one situation.
That adds about 2 hours worth of administrative work to the process. So you can add $100 to the cost of installing a sign then if we have to manage a fund for that.
Yeah, but yeah, I appreciate what you're saying,
Yeah.
Jeff, but it still is something that's gonna be done irregardless. It's just the extra piece of the fund, but the rest of it already has
We're
to be
doing it
done.
anyhow,
So we currently,
one
if,
at a time.
Yeah.
when a plat is done, if there's an existing property that has an address and it needs a new address because of how the plat's being laid out, we collect those fees for those reassignments of addresses, but we don't charge or collect a fee for a vacant lot that doesn't have anything on it, because we used to do that. And as Jeff mentioned, it got to be problematic of keeping track of that, of was the fee paid? It could be several years before one of those lots gets developed, and then the fee is changed, and it doesn't, the old fee that was collected doesn't cover the same amount of the cost that the current fee would. So that's why we went to just charging that for existing addresses that would need to get reassigned.
There's gotta be a solution to this. I can't imagine, other counties haven't figured it out. But maybe not. Maybe they're doing what you're saying to do.
And then there are a number of them that have done that. They just roll it into their levy and then they don't worry about it anymore.
Yeah, then the only thing that you'd have to process would be when somebody wants a replacement. You know, like somebody runs it over, the lawnmower catches it or whatever, twists the sign, bends it, backs into it, whatever the case might be, and then it's on the property owner to order a new post and a sign and install it themselves. I guess if it was gonna come to installing it, maybe the highway department could charge them specifically a fee to install if they didn't have the confidence in placing it in the right spot, but maybe that could be arranged.
You'd still have to go out and mark the right spot
Mhm.
and then come back and verify.
Unless the post is still in the ground
Yeah.
and twisted or whatever, so you know that that's the
Yeah.
location, but, cause if it was installed once, you would assume that it's still
Right.
safe, so.
Well, I would suggest we keep thinking about this and see if we can come up with some sort of a,
Yeah, when you think about the millions of dollars that we levy, I'm guessing you're looking at 40,000 would probably take care of this. But like we say, where do we find the savings somewhere else to pay for that? But yeah, thank you for bringing it to our attention. Probably when I'm trying to go to sleep tonight, I'll come up with something. Or
Write
maybe
it
not-
down and,
or maybe not, yeah.
I'm just not excited about levying any new dollars.
I understand that.
So I would be inclined to leave it as it is for a while, but trying to think of ways to, other than this, to address it. And maybe we end up coming back to this eventually and rolling it in.
So are you
not
interested in
today.
looking into raising the fees for these things?
Well, according to what you're saying, costs are going up. Obviously, you can't cover it all. It's what, 110 now?
Mm-hmm.
I could see going maybe to 150, but I wouldn't do any more than that. That's,
Yeah.
as a property owner, I wouldn't have a problem paying for it. I want my home with a 911 sign on so they can find me.
Basically, you're looking at it as a one-time investment,
Mhm.
sort of thing for your own safety and protection
Right.
for service.
That way, at least you're still collecting the $15,000 to $20,000 in revenue to take some sting out of it.
And same thing then with the road signs, who pays for those? The person who developed the road?
Yep.
And nobody's been declining to pay that, have they?
Just that one party that I previously mentioned.
So I'd hate to say it, but I'm gonna say it anyhow, maybe we should look at raising the fees. Because if you think about the cost of doing a road, and then you're gonna be asked to spend $275 for a road sign, that's probably the least expensive part of building a road.
That doesn't even cover the cost of a culvert, you know, it just,
Yeah.
so a road sign is a small part of it.
And same thing with the new sign at your new address. If you've gone all out and bought the property and built a driveway and building a house or a cabin or just a campsite, that 911 address is probably one of the smaller fees you'd have to pay, and I would think, a good value.
It would be interesting to get a legal opinion on the requirements for each property to have a 911 address at the end of the driveway. You know, what if somebody chooses not to buy it? Do we legally, are we obligated to provide one for emergency services purposes? That would have to take, obviously, an attorney to make that designation, but, and I'm certainly not one. But I just don't know what the legality of it is. Same thing with even some of the street signs. I know previously, we've had complaints at township level that a street sign was placed on the opposite side of the intersecting road, and that when you're going down the highway, you're looking toward that side for the street you're supposed to be on, but here the street sign's on the south side of the road and not on the north side where you're looking. So sometimes it's a little deceiving, and I can understand consistency wise, but not everybody thinks that way, so.
Okay, I
So
can,
I'd let that one lie for a little while. That's what I would do. I don't know, what's the rest of the board concur?
Well, instead of letting it lie, I think, we do need to look at increasing fees, which will come out, later this year for approval.
Yeah.
okay. The next topic for the board is relative to our septic program. And just to let you know that our program has thankfully benefited from the last 25 plus years of having a private contractor, that it worked very well for them and the county, for them to do almost all of our inspections for new installs. It's a requirement in the state septic rules that we do that when new systems are installed. The contractor's past typical retirement age and has some other existing underlying circumstances that could cause them to, either out of choice or not out of choice, no longer be able to continue to perform that service for us. Over the years, we've inquired with other contractors to see if they would have interest in doing that service, and they've either said no or with conditions as to certain geographies only that they wanted to cover, which would make it very difficult for us in administering the day-to-day inspection scheduling, or they do it at a much higher cost. And then there's always the uncertainties of whether the quality of the work would be up to required standards. So what we're looking at is having to plan for our staff taking this capacity, this duty over at some point in the future. I don't know if it'll be next year, could be 2 years from now, 3 years from now. But I've visited with Jeff about that, and we will be including an additional environmental specialist position in our 27 budget proposal. Not necessarily that we're looking for that to be filled in 27, but it's to put it on the board's radar that at some point in time we will have to face the fact that more than likely we're going to have to do these inspections in-house again, which we did many years ago. And then with that, there'll be the additional cost of a added vehicle that will require to be able to keep staff in the field and doing other things in addition to septic systems, and not having a vehicle tied up on septic inspections throughout the construction season.
Didn't the county used to have two contractors that performed this service?
We did, and then one of the two individuals passed away, and so then, the other one was able to take that additional workload, and it's worked very well, and we've saved a tremendous amount of money over these 2.5 decades, with what they charge, but it's,
And it frees up staff.
yes,
To take care of other items instead of driving to Plantagenet to
right.
inspect the septic.
Yeah, and that's one of the difficulties is you never know until the morning of what you're gonna have for inspections for the day, and so it's difficult to schedule other work if you're using existing staff levels because they can't. We'd have to be very mindful of who's scheduling what other field work so that we always have somebody available to do septic inspections.
I am kind of surprised that there isn't a private individual looking to step up to do what this individual has done for the last 25 years, you know. It's a full-time job, you know, until winter comes along, but then there's continuing education and training that you still need to keep your certifications.
Mm-hmm.
So it's,
And don't they have to inspect it at several different times during the process?
It can be done in one field visit, it depends. If somebody is only putting the tank in, and then doing the drain field later, then there would be two, inspections that would be needed. And we do have a re-inspection fee that we charge in those instances to help, cover the cost of the inspector having to go out twice.
So why can't we use existing contractors that are willing to do it in a certain geographic area and then use staff to cover the remaining areas with existing staff? And see how that goes.
We can explore that, you know, it'd be a matter of if the people that we've talked to in the past would be interested. You know, sometimes when it's just, you're talking of an idea, they might say one thing, and then when it comes to brass tacks of are you truly serious, then they tend to back away because, you know, you'd be obligated to block out the whole construction season every day of the work week, the whole day potentially. And so you've got to have a unique niche where you've got something else that you're willing to be able to be flexible on of jumping to if you have a day where you've only got one inspection and then you've got other days where you might have 8. And so,
I know, you know, like several times I've had to have mine inspected, I've had two different people inspect it, and not the one that you're talking about retiring. So that would be 3 right there. But if the bulk, you know, I imagine most of them want to restrict to geographic area where the population is probably heavier. So it may work.
you just have to avoid the conflict of somebody inspecting their own system that they're installing or that their company is installing. Or
yep.
if there's bad blood between somebody, that they would inspect somebody's system that was installed and they might fail it. I mean,
Or we,
there's a lot of pitfalls that can happen as well.
yeah, and we ran into that in the past when we had 2 inspectors that were private contractors where we'd get somebody that would call in and say, I want this one, I don't want that one. And it's like, well, you don't get to choose who's going to do the inspection. But Steve raises a good point that we have had that issue in the past where when you'd have private contractors doing inspections, they'd also be doing design work in the county. And then they can't inspect their own design. And depending on Murphy's Law, it always seemed that the days would happen in a way that it would be the need for them to go inspect their own design because of who can do what, and it just makes it it adds complexity to the daily scheduling of the inspections when you do that.
And you also want consistency. That means quite a bit. But this isn't very far off from the county going countywide assessing on our own either. Really, it's basically kind of the same thing. If we're gonna start doing our own assessing, you know, why wouldn't it make sense for us to do our own septic inspections? We're giving the permit, we're not doing the install or anything, so.
And in the same
I can
token,
kind of see the similarities of the two of them.
in the same token too, though, the assessors, as long as the assessors are still working, there's some areas where we're gonna have to assess ourselves, so maybe the same thing with the septics here. we can assess, we can inspect some, but maybe there are some private individuals that will do certain areas and help.
I'm not promoting that we grow government, that kind of idea, but I mean, these are necessary tasks that have to happen in the process of the big picture. And some of these things may make more sense to bring in-house to take care of, rather than having someone else do them.
So someone from the public suggested to me last night that we put on a hiring freeze because our most expense here is labor, okay? I'm not giving an opinion here about whether we should do that or not, I'm just asking you a question. And so in my question, the public needs to also understand that we've given great service through the years, and part of that is required staff. However, I share the same concern as most people that I talk to. Am I gonna be able to afford to live in my house? Because my property taxes are just going too high. Now we have all these unfunded mandates. So hypothetically, my question to you, Eric, is if we don't have the option to hire another employee and you can't find someone to contract with, then the work that you, and we're obligated to do this, we have to do this from the state.
Yep.
So then, is the public looking at, it's just gonna take a lot longer? Say I'm building a house or I'm putting in a new septic system. Instead of you having an inspection done in 3 days, I might have to wait 2-3 weeks? Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah. We can attempt to do this with existing staff, but it's going to result in much longer processing times, turnaround on everything else, and we've got a small construction season window, so we've always taken pride in our ability relative to a lot of neighboring counties to be able to have, processing times within a few days to a week tops, as opposed to a month elsewhere. So that certainly could be an option that we could do, is just to say, hey, times are tight and we're going to have to do this with existing staff, and that means that, if you turn a permit in, it's going to be a few weeks before you get it back. But then you get the contractors that are saying time is money, and
Oh, I understand that. But at what point I don't have an answer. How do we work with all this with the state?
I just know I'm not interested in increasing FTEs. I'm just not. There has to be legitimate, and there are in this case, but you're really gonna have to convince me hard to increase FTEs this year, because we've been growing at a clip that is not sustainable. So I would encourage to try to continue to work with contractors where you can and do in-house what you can. And if it gets to the point where it's not manageable, then you need to come back to us with this again, and we're gonna have to do something about it. In the meantime, I'm willing to try anything and everything else but increasing FTEs.
Eric, do you
And
know
that's gonna
how,
be the same message from me across every darn department head this year.
do you know how long it would take for a private individual to get certified to do the septic inspections? Would it take a year?
the state doesn't offer the classes frequently, and you need a certain number of classes, and so depending on when you'd start relative to when that first class is offered, if you hit it just right, you might be able to get it done in a year.
Okay.
You're looking more at 2 years realistically, because you have to get all the classes done. Then there's field work that you have to do under a mentor, and that takes some time too. There's certain types of systems you have to inspect, and so you've got to have all that just work.
So it would be a good business opportunity for someone.
And I don't remember. I remember, when we look at the bills each month, I remember seeing payment. What does the person get per system?
125, which when you do the math on 3 to 4 hours time of per
Yeah,
inspection,
we're only looking at $40,000 a year.
I don't know how he has done it and been willing to keep doing it at that amount.
So the new contractors, what would be a price they would want?
Well, I mean, a typical compliance inspection on an existing system, that's less work. You're looking at $400 average for that, so you're looking at
130,000, okay.
a quadruple, probably maybe more. So then it gets into, you're looking at 300 systems a year. You're getting up into that range where it then might be equivalent to having an FTE.
And what are we charging for the permit?
It varies with whether it's residential or commercial, but it's around 300 for a residential permit.
Yeah, I'm not arguing too. I mean, you could hire the FTE and you would probably have the fees to pay for the FTE, but it still grows the levy.
Yeah, because you
Yeah,
have to
you
pay
get
for
the,
it upfront.
you're gonna get some revenue to offset it or match it, but you're still growing the levy. And when the levy's been growing as much as it has over the last 5 years, the taxpayer's not gonna take too kindly to it. Even if there is matching revenue, they're just not gonna like it. So I would just assume, try to work with private contractors and continue as we are. It might come back that it just isn't gonna work, but I think we should try. Because then at least I can go to my constituents and say, yeah, we tried to do it this way and it didn't work. This is the only way that's gonna work.
Does anybody know somebody that's looking at retiring and wants a part-time job? That would be certified to do this. It would be a great,
Yeah. I mean, the townships had the same problem with the snow plowing, and then eventually a couple of people stepped up and now there's a business or two generated from it. So when the public becomes aware of it, maybe somebody's gonna be willing to step up and do it. Sorry
we're
to be a
not full of
downer.
good news for you today, Eric.
It's not unexpected things that I knew. It's not an ideal time, but at the same time, I'd be remiss if I didn't make you aware of the situation.
I think we all appreciate that. And then as far as like where I stand on the software and stuff, well, that's, there's capital funds for things like that, which are already funded. We just have to choose what we want to spend it on.
So the next topic is with our AIS program, also budget related, and I've mentioned this to the board before that last year we had our state funding reduced 50%. That will take effect July of 27. We're currently receiving $263,000 from the state, and that would drop to $131,000 roughly. This year was our highest amount of stakeholder donations at just over 200,000. So the big unknown is when the state funding reduces, what will that do, if anything, to the amount of stakeholder donations that we receive? So we've been looking at our scheduling, and historically we've applied the state funding to watercraft inspection hours on the lakes that we deem to be highest priority, and then the stakeholder funds we've applied to whatever lakes for inspection hours that those funds come from. So if Lake A gives us $5,000, we put that toward $5,000 worth of inspections on that lake. But that has worked well from a political aspect, but it's led to us having inspection coverage at times of the week when the watercraft traffic isn't very high, so you're not getting many inspections per hour, so that if you were looking excuse me, at it from a business standpoint, you wouldn't be having an inspector there. There's also others, that lakes that have had a very long inspection season, so they, on the bookends of the season, they've got inspectors there well into October when the amount of boaters is minimal. So we've laid out some options of pulling those inspection hours back to focusing on just the high priority lakes, say those that already are infested with things that we don't want spreading. And we could do that, but then we don't know how that's gonna impact stakeholder contributions. If they aren't getting their lake covered, they might say, well, you know, it's the tragedy of the commons is what it's called, of people are focused on their lake and they can't see the greater good of contributing to inspections elsewhere. So, it's just something that we're gonna have to be looking at, and we probably will have to make the decision once, you know, we get the stakeholder money for next year in and see where we're at with that. But, some of it I could see being that the stakeholders are gonna wanna know what direction we're planning to go, because they're gonna be hesitant to contribute without knowing where that contribution's gonna be used.
Yeah, it's a shame we don't have a little more flexibility with the weather. I mean, yesterday that was kind of rainy and whatnot. Well, an inspector was sitting at the access. Well, we're certainly not inspecting boats in the rain. You know, I know you have to schedule people to be there certain hours a day. You never can tell the weather and whatnot, but it'd be nice if there was that flexibility. Say, okay, well, today there's not going to be that kind of anticipated activity. You know, you should shift your day to another day, but it just doesn't. It just doesn't work in scheduling and budgeting and expense wise. But sometimes there's some hours that, so to say, seem wasted. But
I think almost every stakeholder is assuming that we're gonna cut back, that we're not gonna make up the difference. I mean, that the people I've talked to are assuming that. And so they're already trying to figure out how they can up donations to have the inspection hours stay the same on their lake. And so, I think you're gonna be met with great resistance. I appreciate the business model, but I share your concern that if I'm giving money and my lake's not covered, I'm not saying this, I'm just giving an example, then I'm not gonna give.
Your staff, as they always have, will do the best they can to
Yep.
schedule the hours in the appropriate spots at the appropriate time. I truly believe that. And I get the same read from my constituents and the taxpayer too. It's like, you know, the state's got a problem where they can't afford to fund it, and now this cost is gonna get passed on to the county if you wanna fund those hours. But we got the same problem. And I think they understand that, the stakeholders understand that, hence they stepped up donations a year early, knowing this is coming. And I think that's probably the way it's gonna land, and we do the best we can with what we have.
Yeah, with this, I'm not asking or suggesting that we
Right,
levy
I
any
know.
Yeah.
amount for it.
Yeah. And you guys will do a good job, you always do.
Thank you. So that's the FYI on AIS. The next one is relative to ordinance amendments. With our main ordinances, our 911 that I already mentioned, we've got a draft that I've been working on the last few years to make that more robust to deal with the various situations that we encounter. I'm also looking at an accompanying policy that would allow us to drill more into the details of situations that arise but not frequently, so that we've got something that we can refer to when somebody says, well, how come I have to do it this way? With the other ordinances, shoreline subdivision and septic, there would be benefit from having legal counsel review those, mainly to evaluate wording and tighten it up so there's less room for ambiguity or interpretation challenges, which would allow us to respond to customer inquiries more readily and not have to always, or as often as we do, consult counsel for how do we apply the ordinance in this situation. So what's proposed is that we would, you'll see a budgeted amount that I'll have in my 27 budget for having counsel look at those primary ordinances that we deal with, to go through them evaluate the language and make proposed edits for tightening those up so that it hopefully then allow staff to be able to read an ordinance and apply it properly without as much difficulty. And that's somewhat due to, over the years, we haven't consistently had council review ordinance amendments when they're made. And so things get missed, and one section that we didn't think pertained to another actually does. And so it would allow us to catch all those things and make sure that they're congruent. And then the last item, and I know we're running tight on time before you want to tour the LEC, is kind of involving the strategic plan as well as some budgeting aspects and just helping with development and allowing that to happen without government processing causing unnecessary timeline extensions that they have to deal with. So the first would be, and I know we've discussed this before, but the board also asked that we look at things that we could do relative to our zoning to make things easier for development. And the two relatively low-hanging fruit items that we could come up with would be with our conditional use permit and plat processes to be able to shorten them and then not have it take the time that it currently does for somebody to go through those approval processes. So with a conditional use permit, as you know, it goes to the Planning Commission, who holds a public hearing, and then it goes to the county board for final approval. One thing that we could do to improve the timeline would be to grant the Planning Commission the authority to act on those conditional use permits. That shaves a month off the process. We often have projects that involve the need for a conditional use permit and a plat approval. And so with the conditional use taking 2 months currently and the plats taking at least 4 months, maybe 5 or 6, you're looking at potentially a 6 to 8 month window for one of those projects to go through our process. If we shorten the CUP process in half with the plat application, I've vetted this with other counties as well as with our council, and they all seem to agree that the way that we could shorten the plat process would be to have the prelim plat go still to the Planning Commission and the county board. So that way, when you see the final, there's no surprises if you hadn't had a chance to look at the preliminary plat. But we could eliminate the Planning Commission review of the final plat application, because in my 20 plus years of doing this, I've never seen them, raise a flag or say time out. The final isn't aligning with what we approved in the prelim. So we could take Planning Commission review of final plats out of that process, and then that would shave a month off of our plat application process from start to finish. So those were the final two proposals, suggestions that I wanted to share with the board for you to chew on.
So then they would still come to the county board as the final?
Yes, the final plat would solely go to the county board instead of also going to the Planning Commission, because like mentioned, I've never seen the Planning Commission do anything other than say, yes, it looks good, and recommend it.
These conditions were met.
Yep.
And then we do the same thing.
Right.
Makes sense.
So with your first option, you're just eliminating that second time in front of the PC.
Correct, yep. And then with conditional uses, as those can tend to be contentious matters and take a tremendous amount of review time, having that in the hands of the Planning Commission, they go to trainings regularly, they stay current on all the fine, important legal details that you need to be mindful of, and then it would buffer the board from those potentially contentious applications, so then it doesn't turn into a political matter instead of being vetted on the merits of the application.
I think that makes sense, and then it still catches any, I mean, it still lands on our lap for any, contentious issues or anything like that. Jeff, you see any issues with that?
I don't. We've had conversations about varieties of ways of shortening this up, and in between, we get comments from you about what can we do to make it easier for people to develop their properties. One of these is just this administrative process that we have. So I don't, it's consistent with what other people are doing in the places where we find we have the most public issue. It's still gonna end up coming to the board. So I told Eric, I said, it's a good time to bring it back up again. We've heard the comments about streamlining the process, and we still know the board's concern about wanting to have an opportunity to review some of the higher, 2 or 3 in the last couple of years that have really risen to that level. And then the vast majority of things that are coming through for your signature are just administrative, could have been done otherwise. So if the vast majority of those items can be carried in the recommendation of the process that Eric has here, then I think we're accomplishing both. But I think we'd probably have to, what we do to do this is we'd redline those policies and bring them to be both before the planning commission and this board in the appropriate order, for them to be reviewed again and for action to be taken on them. Is that what your recommendation would be if we think we can do some of this?
Yeah, then we'd start the ordinance amendment drafting process, and I don't think it'd be too difficult because we just have to deal with the procedure sections in the ordinance that say how you go through those application processes.
Eric, I appreciate all the thought and you putting this down on paper for us to look at and to think about. And my one takeaway is if there's anybody in the public that's certified and wants to start a business, contact Eric.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for the detail.
You're welcome. And that's all that I had. Thank you for the time.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Eric.
While we are waiting for our tour guides, and if they're not here in a few minutes, we're gonna go and let Corey go ahead and give the tour. He's doing that. I don't have their update on the project. I will just have to email it out to you at this point in time, but from what I understand, we're still on schedule. We are done except for a few punch list items in this building. And it might be overwhelming to walk through the attorney's office at this point in time with a group, but it might be worthwhile to pop in and see what the spaces look like now that they're occupied. And with the balance of the project, I believe, is still scheduled to be done by October this year, which was the original timeline for that. Overruns we've been handling. I think we're still within the limits of our extra fund, contingency fund for that. So we should be in good shape unless at this point in time, I'm not expecting anything major coming up. We have accommodated a few things, but the big one that we accommodated was the one where we moved that 250 from capital into there to add to that, but that's still what we're working off of. We should be able to meet limits within that. That was when we added the extra scope in law enforcement, part of what you're gonna see today. And when you see that, it's gonna make sense that what we did is the first hallway from the administrative space back to the Sheriff's office was within the scope, and the stuff in the next hallway going to the west was not within the scope, and the locker rooms and the bathrooms. And it just didn't make sense to stop the project there. So that's why we added that at that point in time. So, I would suggest that we are probably gonna be doing the tour on our own. So I will text Corey and let him know that we're gonna be down there. We're gonna meet in the new, in the human service entrance at that temporary entrance to the law enforcement center. And we'll let Corey do the tour. So if we could get a, I don't even know what we need to do, but we're basically recessing to the tour and then adjourning to our training session afterwards. So if we want to make a motion to
I'll
do
make that
now.
motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.